Hey, this is Matt Wenning at WenningStrength.com, and today we're going to talk about what it takes to be an elite lifter. Now, there's always exceptions to the rule, but today I want to go over some key points that I think will make you the best that you can possibly be. The first thing that you need to do is you need to be active when you're a kid, okay? So a lot of the greatest lifters that I know, Eddie Cohen started lifting very young. Gary Frank played football at the professional level. We could go on, but I'm going to name quite a few more lifters in this video as we do more research on it. But if you really want to be a great lifter, there's a couple things that you need to have. One, you need to be mobile, okay? Mobility is going to be huge. Now, I know that that's more a physical therapy thought process or a medical process, but in my opinion, if you're not mobile enough to do the movements, you're going to be in big trouble. And how do I know this? Well, I know this from being hit by a car. So when I was a kid at 6 years old, I was struck by a car and I was in a wheelchair and bedridden for almost a whole year. Homeschooled the entire first grade. Now, the level of mobility that I achieved back was marginal compared to what if I had never been hit by a car or been bedridden for an entire year. So a lot of the different movements took me years to be mobile enough to do it. So I would have thought, or I would find, that if you are great in mobility or you are good at flexibility and movement patterns, you're going to be really good. That means you need to be stretching a lot when you're a kid. The problem is if you're probably watching this video, you're not 5, 6 years old and you don't have the cognitive ability to understand this. So some of this goes out to you parents. Make your kids mobile. Be mobile from the age of like 4 to 13 if you want to be a great lifter. This leads us into our second thing. You need to have perfect motor patterns. So without mobility, you can't have perfect motor patterns. Why? Because it's probably going to be uncomfortable or hurt when you get in those positions. So what does that mean? Well, that means if you got to get in a sumo deadlift position or a deep squat position and you got your lower back pulling or it's hurting your hamstrings or your glutes aren't activating correctly or you have to shift your shins way over your toes in order to achieve depth, you're not going to be at an optimal range to be able to lift maximal weights. Well, what happens if you start lifting at 12, say 13 years old optimally? If you start lifting at 12, 13 years old and you have no mobility, you're going to have poor motor patterns. Those poor motor patterns are going to be brutal to change if you develop them for 5, 6, maybe 10 years. We see this a lot with online coaching and in the gym where we get new clients come in. They might be anywhere from 19 to 27 or 30. They come in and they think they're still in their prime, which they are for most people, but they already have a ton of years of either poor technique or bad mobility. So what do you think happens with their technique? Well, one, it's hard as hell to change. So if you start with a good mobility base and then good technical proficiency, your ability to get stronger is not only going to be easier, it's going to be safer. Okay, so the next thing for you to be as good as you possibly can is to look at everything in a 24-hour period. And what does this mean? This means that a lot of times the most important things that you're doing are not in the gym. They're outside of the gym. What are your sleeping habits, right? Are you getting a solid 8 hours? Are you trying to get to bed before 9:30, 10 o'clock so that you're asleep very deeply between the hours of 1 and 3 a.m.? That's going to be a huge proponent for you getting as strong as you possibly can be. The next thing is, are you taking your nutrition seriously? Are you eating the proper foods? Are you eating consistently throughout the day as far as trying to get a meal in every 2 to 3, maybe 4 hours? If you're doing those things, you're going to be able to train a little harder. You're going to be able to build a little bit more muscle. You know, it's hard to drive a muscle car with 0 in the gas tank, right? Or if you put 87 octane in a Ferrari, it's not going to run correctly. The same thing holds true with your body. If you want Ferrari level standards of horsepower, torque, and strength, then you're going to have to run the right type of fuel and put the fuel in at the right time. This means making sure that you're on a scheduled meal pattern, making sure you're eating enough proteins, fats, and carbohydrates, not ignoring either one of those areas, and then also with the type of diet that the Westerners eat, or actually all across the world, making sure that you have the supplementation involved. Multivitamins. Most people are deficient in magnesium. If you don't know about that, check out ATP Labs or ask us a question on Patreon. We can tell you the dosage. A lot of these other things are huge. So look at things at a 24-hour period, right? Sleep, nutrition, and training. Most of us, especially when we're younger, we think it's all locked into training. That's not exactly true. So we've covered these 3 areas, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some of the lifters that I feel were the best in their era and their background. So let's look at Bill Casimir. He's renowned by the guys that are 50 plus years old to be one of the greatest strength athletes in the world. And why? Well, he won 3 World's Strongest Men and he won at least 2 IPF World Championships at the super heavyweight. He also bench pressed 661 in a full meet back in the day when that was nearly impossible. He was a great football player before he ever touched powerlifting, number one. Number two, his entire childhood was manual labor. So if you go back and you go into the YouTube videos and type in Bill Casimir on my page, you'll find a huge podcast that we did with Bill Casimir a handful of years ago, and he basically talks about how he had to haul wood from the time he was, I'd say, 10 to 15 years old, every day and every weekend and every summer. He's carrying logs all day. So when he first gets introduced to lifting weights, he can deadlift 500 pounds easy because he was lifting all the time. Point was, he had a great background as a youth in doing a lot of physical activity. Another great lifter would be Gary Frank. Gary Frank was the first man to take lifting from 2,500, 2,600, 2,700, and 2,800 pounds in equipped lifting. He was a pro football player. He was a great football player in college. The point being is that he had a great athletic base before he even started powerlifting, and then that's what made him really, really good at lifting. I literally watched him stiff-legged deadlift like 960 pounds after a 1,100 pound squat and an 800 plus pound bench press. The guy had a 28 ring finger. I mean, a freaking Vienna sausage. But the point was is that he was already a great athlete before he even touched powerlifting. Flipping topics a little bit off of powerlifting and into bodybuilding, look at Franco Columbu. Franco Columbu was a Mr. Olympia, but he was also a really good boxer in Italy. He was an immense athlete that trained with Arnold Schwarzenegger, his side partner, and was insanely strong. Deadlifting somewhere around 770 at like 220, 230 body weight. That's pretty impressive for a bodybuilder. The point is that Franco Columbu was already an amazing boxer. Now, we'll flip the coin to the other side. Let's look at football. If you go to Alabama or you go to Ohio State, let's just say two of the arguably most powerful football teams in the country, the first thing that they look at when they're getting an athlete in is, are they a three-sport athlete? Can they play football? Do they do basketball and maybe track? Why? Because the bigger the base, the taller the pyramid. So a lot of these big colleges are looking for multiple sport athletes in order for them to have a bigger chance of succeeding when they specify. So if you're 18 or under, you need to be doing a lot of different sports. You need to be training in a lot of different ways and then worrying about specifying into being the strongest you can be, probably somewhere between your mid-20s and your mid-30s. I didn't get my strongest I possibly was until about 36 years old, but I had to hang in there and not get hurt doing that. Now, my background, even though I got hit by a car, I was a great swimmer. I was a great mountain bike rider. I was actually sponsored by Cannondale at one time. So those two sports really, really developed my shoulders and my back and my work capacity. So case in point is that if you want to be good at anything, and you definitely want to be good at powerlifting, you need to be a good athlete in general, and that will help a ton. So if you like what you saw or you have any questions, go on Patreon, sign up there. We can answer as much as you can. You guys see some sample workouts that we use for tactical, clients, athletes, all kinds of stuff. The other thing that you might want to consider is that if you're a multiple sport athlete or you have injuries, you might want to consider getting on our online coaching and have one of our professional design stuff custom for you.